Amen. You guys can take a seat. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here at Revision. I'm excited to be here this morning. How about you? All right. So when I was in high school, I spent a little bit of time volunteering at a camp called Pine Lake in the booming metropolis of Eldora, Iowa. And one night when we were there, some friends and I decided to go into town and see what we could find. And what we found was a wheelchair by the dumpster of an assisted living facility. And we were teenagers, so naturally we rode it down the closest hill we could find. And a couple streets over, there was a road with a pretty steep grade. And so we started riding it down and quickly learned why it was by the dumpster. It had a flat tire. So it kept pulling to the left. And then my friend Jason had a brilliant idea. He said, what if you stand on the back while I sit in it and we just kind of lean and use our weight to make it go straight? And I said, that's genius. And I hopped on. And it was about halfway down the hill that the thought crossed my mind, we are totally going to crash and I should bail right now. But I'm wearing my favorite soccer jersey and I want to rip it. So I'm just going to ride this thing out and see what happens. What happened was we got to the intersection below and hit a lip in the pavement we didn't know was there. And then physics took over. I got launched over Jason's head all the way across the intersection until my momentum was graciously stopped by the curb. And Jason actually flipped backwards, and the wheelchair was going so fast it dragged him down the street. And this girl we were with, Becca, came running down asking, you guys all right? Are you guys all right? Are you guys all right? And Jason said, I don't know, I'm all scraped up and bleeding. And I said, I think I'm fine. I had rolled at that point into the grass so I didn't get run over. And then thought, yeah, I'm doing all right. And I tried to push myself up, and this side didn't go. And all of a sudden, excruciating pain shot through my entire body. And luckily, we had a wheelchair handy. So I hopped in that bad boy and got wheeled back up the hill. And we drove to the hospital, and I walked in there in some of the most incredible pain I've ever been in my entire life. And I got told, we're going to have to take an x-ray. And I asked, could I get some medication for the pain? I think I'm going to pass out. And the nurse told me, we actually can't give you anything until after we take the x-ray. Which is no big deal, right? Unless you're in Eldora, Iowa, and only one person in the entire town is a trained x-ray technician, and she's in bed. So they called her up, and they told me she was on the way, and I will never forget the waiting. Just the intense moments of waiting for her. I just kept alternating between getting really angry, like, what's she doing driving from Chicago? And trying to, like, calm myself down, like, no, I'm sure she's getting here as fast as she possibly can. And I kind of made peace with that idea in my mind, until she walked in with a donut and a coffee from Hy-Vee. Like apparently something in her cold, dead heart decided, who cares about that kid? I'm ready for a snack. Like I don't know why I use that voice. People from Eldora don't talk like that. It's the middle of Iowa. But either way, I'm pretty sure that's what she thought. And then she took the x-ray, and it turned out I had snapped like a 1-inch piece out of the middle of my collarbone. It was just dangling in my shoulder, and they finally gave me pain meds. I wonder this morning, like, how many of us have ever been in that spot? Like, not sitting in a small town with a broken bone, but hurting and waiting. Sitting in a place of pain, waiting, hoping that God will show up and do something, and wondering why it's taking him so long. Feeling like maybe he forgot about us. Maybe he's not coming at all. Maybe he stopped for a donut and a coffee along the way because he just doesn't care. And we're stuck in the struggle asking the question, like, how long? How long is this going to last? How long is this pain going to be a constant companion? How long am I going to feel so wrecked? How long must I sing this song? How long? There's a good chance that a lot of us are sitting in here this morning asking that question, how long? Some of us are hurting emotionally. We have relationships that have fallen apart with friends or with family members. We have loved ones who have died. Some of us are hurting physically. We're sick and we're nervous about the unknown that lies ahead. Or we have people we care about who are sick, and it's kind of put our lives on hold until something happens. Some of us are hurting financially. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you've been looking for work for a really long time, and you're not sure how you're going to keep making ends meet. Not sure what the future's going to hold. Some of us are hurting spiritually. We've got a lot of scars and wounds from our past, or we're struggling with addiction. We're feeling lonely and left out. All of us know what it is to be hurting and waiting and wondering how long. One of my favorite philosophers of the 21st century actually summed up the universality of this condition really well. Just how common it is to experience it if you're human. He's a guy named Andy Dwyer, and he once wrote, or sang actually, "The pit, I fell in it. The pit, you fell in it. The pit, we all fell in it. The pit." Just hashtag truth, right? Some of us are in the pit now. We've all been in the pit. We're all going to be in the pit again. And the good news is we are not alone. We're not the first people in the history of the world to experience this. There's a whole song about it in the Bible, which means we can know that for at least 3,000 years, people have been feeling the way we feel. We're in the middle of this series right now called Treading Water, where we've been examining what God has to say about how we can find hope and meaning and purpose even when we feel stuck. And more importantly, we've been talking about who God is, like who we need to know God is to us when we find ourselves in those seasons. And this morning, we're going to take a look at a 3,000-year-old song about getting stuck in a pit, waiting on God, wondering how long. So if you got a Bible with you, you can crack it open to Psalm 40. It's almost smack dab in the middle. If you hit Job, it looks like Job. Keep going. If you hit Proverbs, go back. If you don't have a Bible with you, you can follow along in the Revision app or with the words on the screen. And if you don't own one, we have them in a bunch of colors for a bunch of different age groups. We have reading plans available at the Next Steps table. Please take whatever you want before you go. We love it when that stuff disappears. So Psalm 40 is a song written by King David where he poetically and powerfully reminds us that even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes, with God, a waiting season is never a wasted season. That's what David wants us to know. And this is what he writes in Psalm 40. He says, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and made my footsteps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord and does not look to the proud, to those who turn aside to false gods. Many, Lord my God, are the wonders you have done, the things you planned for us. None can compare with you. Were I to speak and tell of your deeds, they would be too many to declare. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I've come. It's written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, my God. Your law is within my heart. I proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I do not seal my lips, Lord. As you know, I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and your saving help. I do not conceal your love and your faithfulness from the great assembly. Do not withhold your mercy from me, Lord. May your love and faithfulness always protect me, for troubles without number surround me. My sins have overtaken me, and I cannot see. They are more than the hairs of my head, and my heart fails within me. Be pleased to save me, Lord. Come quickly, Lord, to help me. May all who want to take my life be put to shame and confusion. May all who desire my ruin be turned back in disgrace. May those who say to me, aha, aha, be appalled at their own shame. But may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who long for your saving help always say, the Lord is great. But as for me, I am poor and needy. May the Lord think of me. You are my help and my deliverer. You are my God. Do not delay. Guys, I think waiting on God is the hardest work of hope when we're treading water. But I want us to walk out of here understanding something about who God is. Knowing that even when it feels like nothing is happening in our lives and our situations, something is happening. There are a couple things David knew that he points us to in Psalm 40 because they're useful for us in difficult seasons. They remind us that with God, a waiting season is never a wasted season. And the first thing David knew is this: God's help is my only hope. God's help is my only hope. David's talking about this situation where his life is stuck and things are rough. He's down deep in the muck and the mire and the pit. And this word we translate slimy, it's interesting, is actually literally roaring waters in Hebrew. This is David's way of saying, like, this situation was really bad. It wasn't just one of those times where I was stuck and nothing was happening. It's one of those times where I was stuck and horrible, terrible, no good, very bad, awful things were happening. I was treading water in a hurricane. And he doesn't tell us the specific context of the situation. I think that's on purpose. He's talking about a moment in his life, but he's writing this song as kind of a universal expression of the human condition of hurting and waiting. And so throughout the psalm, he talks about troubles without number surrounding him, all this stuff that's going on in the world. Troubles around us, sickness, disaster, and disease. Troubles against us, enemies, people who want to do us harm, hatred and vitriol, and even troubles within us, our own sin and brokenness. But it's David's response to all that that's fascinating. Like what David does when the trouble comes, what David does when he's stuck in the pit is completely counterintuitive and completely countercultural. He kicks off the song by saying, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry. David found himself in trouble and he cried out, and then he waited patiently. And I don't know about you guys, but those are two of the last things on earth I want to do when difficulty strikes. Like, ask somebody else for help and then sit there and wait? No. I prefer to let my pride swell up real big and take over and then look at myself in the mirror and be like, all right, Mike, what do you got to do to get yourself out of this? And like raw, vulnerable pastor moment. Yeah, I use a manly voice when I'm talking to myself in the mirror. My normal one does not inspire a lot of self-confidence in me. It's just like, laugh if you want. I know I'm not the only one who does that. Whose natural inclination is to rely on my own efforts to get me out. We live in a society that constantly reinforces the idea that if you just want it bad enough, you can do anything. And we put self-sufficiency up on a pedestal like it's the greatest of all human virtues. And so when the going gets rough, we decide to lean into our pride and do it on our own, and it costs us again and again and again. A couple weeks ago, Jenny and I were in Seattle, and we went to Mount Rainier National Park, and we went on like a half-mile hike to a waterfall, which, as an avid indoorsman, that was a lot for me. Like, it was a lot for me to get to the park and then to go on the hike. But whatever, we went, and it was really pretty. And then we got there, and Jenny's like, well, what if we went just a little bit further and saw what's up ahead? So we did. And then she said, well, what if we hiked up that like zigzag path to that peak up there and saw what we could see from there? And we did. And then, are you catching on to the pattern here? Like, and it's okay for me to go outside sometimes. I shouldn't be complaining. There were marmots, and they look like beavers with bushy tails, and they're cute. But the problem was, like, I had this pain. A couple months ago, the doctor told me she thinks I have a bone spur in my hip. I don't even know what that means, other than I'm old and decrepit. So, like, by the time we got to the top of this zigzag thing, my hip and my knee and the whole right side of my leg felt like someone was just stabbing me, like, ha, 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 ha. But like half a lifetime later, I still have this thing inside of me that tells me, despite all the evidence to the contrary in this half lifetime, make your wife think you're tough. Yeah, do that. And I wanted her to be happy. So then when she said, what if we go on the whole hike to the lookout point? I went on a 5-mile, 3-hour, 1,700-foot elevation hike through the park, and every step hurt. And the next morning I woke up and it hurt, and I thought, why did I do that? Why did this happen in my life? And it happened because I am not a smart man. But seriously, this is my response. Every time difficulty comes, like, you're fake tough man voice, let's just power through. Emotional difficulty, spiritual difficulty, physical difficulty, I'll just get it done because I'm impatient and I'm proud. Not David. David cried out. And what we find throughout the Psalms and throughout the narrative in the Old Testament of David's life is that he continually, regularly cried out and came to God with open, empty hands. I think that's actually one of the biggest reasons God called David a man after my own heart. Because David had the humility to understand that his life was God or nothing. He had the humility to understand how dependent he really was. And he also had the humility to understand that, like, the solutions of the world weren't going to help him out. We know what happens when we get in trouble. People come alongside us and like, hey, if you just fudge the numbers here, if you tell that little white lie here, if you just do this, you can get out of it. And David was like, no. The only way for me to get where I want to be is for the God of the universe to make a way. That's why he says in verse 4 that there are blessings up ahead for people who don't turn to pride and don't turn to false wisdom when difficulty strikes, but instead decide to wait patiently on the Lord. I know it's so hard to do that. In a society of instant gratification, we hate waiting at all. And patiently waiting, that's like a whole other level. I can wrap my mind around impatiently waiting while complaining a lot. I'm like a wizard at that. But patiently waiting, I waited patiently on the Lord. Good for you, David. What's going on with that? But here's the cool thing, okay? When we hear patient in English, we usually think passive. Like David's saying, I don't know, I was just in the pit, so I just sat there until God showed up. But that's not actually what he's saying. He uses this idiomatic phrase, waiting, I waited, to communicate that what he was doing was waiting actively with a living hope. He's saying, I did everything that I could do, and then I waited for God to do what only he can do because I know who he is. I knew what was coming, even if I didn't know when it was coming. So this hope, this waiting that David's talking about, this patience that David's talking about, has less to do with our activity level than it does with our attitude. It's this attitude of hoping and waiting and looking up. I think actually like the profoundly beautiful thing about being stuck in a pit is that it forces you to look up. It's kind of the only way you can look. It's also the exact way you need to look because God's help is your only hope. I love the words of Psalm 21. It says, I cast my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help comes from the Lord above. Listen, that's true every day. Every hour, every minute, every second of our lives, that's true, but sometimes it's easy to forget when things are going really well. Which means occasionally it takes the hurt and desperation of getting stuck in the muck and the mire for us to look up and realize how dependent we are. C.S. Lewis put it this way: we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. This idea that there's purpose to be found in pain actually ties into the second thing David understood. The second thing that allowed him to hold on to hope that with God a waiting season is never a wasted season. David understood that the pit is not punishment, it's preparation. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Look, don't get me wrong, sometimes we end up stuck because of the consequences of poor decisions we've made. When I was doing youth ministry, I used to have a sign on my door because I thought it was important for teenagers to see it repeatedly. It said, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes that reason is you're stupid and make bad choices. This is a precious little sign. Yes. But really, even if you're in the space that you're in, because of something dumb you did, you're not there because of God's wrath and vengeance. You're there because he's doing something in you right now. And he's doing something in you, even if you're there as a result of somebody else's bad choices. We all know there's stuff that happens in life that we didn't control, that we couldn't control. Somebody is awful to us, disaster strikes. There are things that happen to us that throw us into seasons of treading water that we can't avoid, and those are some of the worst moments of our lives. If you're anything like me, you can get real bitter real quick in that spot. Angry at God, angry at the world, crying out, why me and how long? And I'm always looking for ways to shortcut my way out of that. Like to try really quickly to learn the lesson God must be trying to teach me so I can tell him that I learned it and then he can get me out of the discomfort. Like, God, I learned that. That's a good lesson. Good job, buddy. Now, chop, chop. I'm done. Get me out. And sometimes it feels like I can even see the place where I want to go. I can see the place where I believe God wants me and he's actively holding me back from getting there. Like when you're on a plane and you get put in a holding pattern right above your destination. You ever had that happen? It's the worst. You can look down and see the place you want to be, and they won't let you out because apparently something's not ready on the ground. In faith, sometimes I think that happens, and then we're like, God, can I just get a parachute? I can see the destination. I'm ready to go. And God says, no, we got to circle around one more time. You can't see what I see up ahead. Something's not ready on the ground yet. And when we're hurting, the waiting is excruciating. And the longer we wait, the sharper the pain. And so I think it's important for all of us to get something this morning. Our world is beautiful but broken. And there is no path from birth to death that avoids every valley and every dark shadow of the human experience. We have a God who knows that and who loves us and who wastes nothing along the way, not even our hurts. God never wastes a hurt. And so when you find yourself in those spaces of frustration, understand that he is at work doing something in you, shaping you for what's ahead. That's a hard truth. Because we all kind of just wish life was a boulevard of unending green lights. even though deep down we know that crisis is sometimes good for us. Have you ever met a kid whose parents removed every single obstacle that could possibly be in their way? Or for that matter, have you ever met an adult whose parents did that? They're just the funnest people, aren't they? It's terrible. We know it. We don't like it, but we know that sometimes difficulty shapes something in us that makes us better, that makes us into the people God created us to be. Like if I asked you right now to write down 5 key moments in your life, 5 things that were seminal for your journey that shaped you, my bet is 2 of them, maybe even 5 of them, would be difficult circumstances you faced that changed and sharpened you. The pit is preparation. God shapes us in the hurting and the waiting and the frustration. In this psalm, it isn't just a psalm of deliverance, it's a psalm of direction. Like David kicks it off by saying, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire, and he set my feet on a rock. But David doesn't stop there. He follows that up with the phrase, and he made my footsteps secure. Like, I don't know how much you guys know about steps, but I did some research this week, and unless you're on a treadmill, they tend to take you to a different place than the place you're in right now. That's science, so don't argue with me about it. But like steps are direction. David's saying, look, God didn't just pluck me out of the pit so I could tread water higher up with a better view. He plucked me out so that I could get going. God shaped me in that difficult season so that I could be the person I need to be, so that I could create the future he put me here to create, so that I could write the story I was born to write. I think probably the greatest difficulty for me and for a lot of us is that while we're in the pit, it is really difficult to see how God could possibly be doing that. I got a buddy who was a Navy SEAL, and I remember talking to him a long time ago, right after he'd been through BUDS, which is Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. It's maybe the most intense, incredible military training exercise in the entire world. That has a 75% attrition rate. Like 3/4 of the best of the best of the best don't even make it through. And I asked him, what's one of the craziest things they made you do? And he told me about this exercise where all of the SEAL candidates had to lay on the deck with their head fully submerged in a pool. And then the trainers came along and completely filled their face masks with water, and their task was to clear the mask. I was pretty intrigued. I asked him, how do you do that? And he said, well, you got to be completely calm. You got to open up your nasal cavity and let the water drain through your sinuses, into your throat, and down into your stomach. And when all the water is through, your mask is clear. But if you panic even a little bit, your gag reflex will go off like that, and you'll just puke your guts out. He's like, oh, man, I was laying there, and I could hear both guys on either side of me just throwing up all over the place. It was so cool. It's so cool. It felt like a really awkward description. So I kind of leaned into that. I was like, help me wrap my mind around this. I've had water go up my nose. I thought it was unpleasant and not cool. So, like, walk me through what is so cool about a bunch of water going up your nose whilst laying in a pool of other people's hurl. Like, help me out. And he said it was so cool because I understood the why. Like, they weren't messing with me. They were preparing me. Mike, in the next few years, there's going to be a time when I'm on a mission and an explosion or something crazy happens and my mask fills up with water. And if I panic in that moment, I'm not going to make it. So the pain of that exercise got me ready for that day. Your pit, it's not punishment, it's preparation. I know it's not fun right now, but right where you are, God is preparing you for what he has already prepared for you. See, the pit may be your present, but God's design is your destiny. He's got a plan for your life. And the third thing David knew helped him hold on to this hope that in God a waiting season is never a wasted season is this. My story points people to their Savior. Like God can use my story to draw other people to himself. Do you guys realize how many people out there in this shattered space we call Earth are yearning to breathe in the oxygen of God's love? The people inside the church, people outside the church, longing for something that only Jesus has to offer. I love it. I love it that David says he put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Like many will see and fear the Lord. So cool. And if see and fear feels like that's a weird phrase. It's Hebrew wordplay. They rhyme. But David's saying a whole lot of people are going to see what God did in my life. God did in my hopeless situation, and they're going to be in awe of who he is. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sing the song of that salvation loudly and continually so that every single life that crashes into my life will get a bigger, better vision, a revision of who God is and how God loves, because the evidence of my deliverance paints a pretty powerful picture of how great he is. And later on in the song, David writes, I proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I don't seal my lips, Lord, as you know. I don't hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak faithfulness and your saving help. I do not conceal your love and your faithfulness from the great assembly. Oh, you guys, this is why we get together. This is why we do life together and faith together. This is why we assemble. This is why we do house groups. It's why it matters so much that you get your name on that list. If you haven't signed up for one, get in one. We need each other. Because look, the minute you get plucked out of the pit and your feet get set on the rock and your footsteps get secure and you start moving again is the minute somebody else hits the pit. It's the minute somebody else finds themselves stuck treading water and they need to be reminded who God is and what God's done. What they need right then isn't a to-do list. It's a God is list. Like this is who he's been again and again and again. That's why David wrote this psalm. We all need to be reminded in our seasons of pain when we're waiting and asking how long. We need someone to come put their arm around us and say, I know it doesn't feel like God's there. I know it feels like he abandoned you, but his silence is not his absence, and his delay is not his denial. I am living proof of that. And the crazy thing is when we do that, when we're able to come alongside people in their pain, then our wounds become our blessings. Because they connect us to each other. We share in the common humanity of brokenness, and God uses our story to write a better story for the hurting people around us by drawing them to himself. And so this morning, above all else, I want to just invite you in to the hope that comes from knowing who God is in the seasons where you're stuck treading water. Because I'm convinced if you let that truth sink down deep in your soul, if you'll walk out of here today believing at the core of who you are, that with God a waiting season is never a wasted season, then the next time you hit the struggle, and there will be a next time for all of us, the next time you find yourself there, you'll be able to respond differently in a way that changes the game for you and for everybody who's watching you, wondering how in the world you could have so much hope and how you could be patiently waiting in the middle of your storm. See, when we understand the character and the love of God, when we get it, that God's help is our only hope, that the pit isn't punishment, it's preparation, and that our story can point people to their Savior, then in the worst moments of our lives, instead of striving and fighting and letting pride get big and doing all the things that come naturally to us, we can humbly come before God, we can cry out and wait patiently with unquenchable hope and passionate expectation for God to lift us up, set our feet upon the rock, and make our footsteps secure. And we can do that. We can cry out and wait patiently because we know that our pain is not the end. Our frustration is not the culmination. This season of waiting, even if it ends in death, is not the final chapter of our story. Like death takes everything and it gives nothing back. But we're not afraid and we have hope even when it comes to death because we're living in a story that arcs far beyond death. Death itself doesn't get to write the final chapter of our story because the author of our story stepped out of eternity into history and gave his life to defeat death from the inside. And so we know that no matter what's going on, no matter how frustrated we are, no matter how bad it hurts, no matter how long we've been stuck, how long we've been waiting, our hope is secure. The one who holds a future has a future for us. This is one of the wheels from the wheelchair that I rode on the night that my collarbone met a curb. And I keep it in my office as a daily reminder to me that no matter how frustrated I get, no matter how stuck my life feels, God, unlike x-ray technicians from Eldora, is not out for a donut and a coffee. He's right there with me. He's working to set all things right and make all things new and shape me into the person who can live the story, like the life of meaning and purpose that he created me for. Right now, the band's going to come back up, and they're going to play a song called 40. And if you know it, you can sing along. But I just want to ask you to do something a little bit different than normal. Under your chair, you have a wheel. It's a paper wheel. I had a cooler plan, but then we got blessed by the opportunity to be in a more intimate venue, and we had a shift. So under your chair, you have a wheel. And as the band plays, I want you to sit and just have a moment with God. Allow God to speak into your soul. Allow hope to thunder into your soul. And come before him and just say, God, look, I'm going to be honest about the places where I'm asking how long. I'm going to be honest with you about the places where I'm frustrated. I'm going to be honest with you about the places where I've been losing hope. I want to invite you to just let him speak love and let him speak life and let him speak hope into you. And then just as an act of faithfulness, as an act of belief, like whether your heart is all the way there or not, just write down on here, my waiting is not wasted, and sign it at the bottom and say, God, I trust you that my waiting is never wasted.